I am going to give you a perspective on character education and use that as a way to allude to some of the things in the book. The book is not written, it's written as a set of reflections. So it's hard to make a coherent talk from a set of disparate reflections, but I can weave them into the more comprehensive approach. So I think that will work better. So let me start by telling you why I do what I do. And I didn't know why I do what I do until recently. I'm not a very self-reflective person. In Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, I probably don't score high on intrapsychic intelligence, looking into yourself and knowing yourself well. But I had to do it in part because of being asked to write a paper for the Jubilee Center in Birmingham, England. And I wrote a retrospective on the 45 years of my career. Many of you in here weren't even born when I started my career. But in doing so, I had to reflect on that. And I realized that what I was doing really was a mission, in essence. I'm Jewish, and in the Jewish tradition, there's a notion called tikkun olam, which means to heal the world. And it comes from actually some mystical theology, origin of the world stories, in which one story is that when God created the world, he had to do some damage and break certain things, vessels from which the substances of the origin of the world came from. And so that when people were created, they were created with the obligation to heal the damage that was done in creating the world. It's one of the origin stories that comes out of the Old Testament tradition. And so every Jewish person is supposed to be raised with the knowledge that we have the obligation to heal the world, to make it a better place. So that's helped me figure out why I do what I do. Because I'm a developmental psychologist. My degree is actually in lifespan development. So I've studied and taught the entire lifespan, from infancy through old age and death and dying. But my interest is children and adolescents. That's where I really focus. And as far as a content interest, I started with Piaget. I started with being interested in the way people think and how we develop the capacity to reason about the world and to develop logical reasoning. But I very quickly became interested in applying that to morality and discovered Lawrence Kohlberg's theory, which is a Piagetian theory of stages of reasoning about right and wrong. And that captivated me. I discovered that early in my graduate career. I did my master's thesis and my dissertation and my postdoctoral work on this, and the early part of my career at Marquette University, which you heard about, which is a Jesuit university in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I did most of that on that work. And then slowly got interested in a broader understanding of what human goodness is through psychology, through a psychological lens. I always see things through that lens because that's my expertise. And so I realized that if I was going to do tikkun olam, heal the world, I should use my strengths. And my strengths were my professional knowledge. So the way to make a better world is to make better people and to help children and adolescents develop to be better people. And so that's an important perspective on why I do what I do. Okay. So let's follow along with the slides, I suppose, if I could figure out how to make this work. Here we go. This is just, you have this on your handout, so this is my calling card. So you have ways to contact me. And you can notice that we're now have a presence on Facebook, Twitter. So if you like any of that stuff, I'm old school. I don't quite get it, but we do it. And so you can follow our work on those as well if you like, or just check out our website. So what I do first is focus on character. But what is that thing? What is character? Well, normally I can do an hour on this one, but I can't do that here. So we're going to do this somewhat quickly. This is one understanding of character. And notice that the organization at the bottom, the Character Education Partnership, it's as close as we come to having a national organization in the U.S. It's not federal. It's a independent organization, but it's as close as we get to that. So they've changed their name now to their URL, so I should fix this, because now they're just called character.org. That's the name of the organization. So everybody knows that Prince just died. Well, this is the organization formerly known as the Character Education Partnership. The artist formerly known as Prince, and then known as Prince again, yes. I don't know. So this is their definition. It's not new in a sense. We've traced it back to Johann Pestalozzi. He had a similar notion. We had a Swiss doctoral student studying with us, and he was reading Pestalozzi in the original German, and came up with a passage that had the same notion in there, which is that to be good, truly good, you need cognitive peace, the head, understanding. You need an affective motivational piece, the heart, and you need a behavioral piece, skills and competencies and actions. And that when we educate, we tend to forget this. And we tend to teach to the head, la cabeza. We tend to teach, to knowledge and reasoning. At least in the US, educators are trained mostly how to transfer knowledge to children, so they know, and perhaps nowadays to promote their critical thinking capacities. But that's still head, that's still knowledge, that's reasoning. That's good. To be a good person, if you know what is right and wrong, knowledge, and you're able to reason effectively about right and wrong, moral reasoning, then that's good. But it's far from being enough. It's not sufficient. What we also need is certainly the motivation and values. Because I tell teachers all the time, if children come out of your schools knowing a set of core values, they know what respect is, and honesty, and fairness, and compassion, and they know what those things are. They can spell them, they can define them, they can use them in a sentence, they can write an essay about them, perhaps write an extensive paper about them, but they don't care about them. You fail. Because those children are not going out in the world and doing tikkun olam. They're not going out in the world to do good. In fact, those people are positioned probably to do as much damage as anybody else, because they can trick people by using the language of morality and reasoning elegantly about morality to hurt people. Those are psychopaths, sociopaths, con men. They can do that. So we need to teach the children's hearts. Okay, we need to get them to internalize those values. And there's a chapter in the book called translating. I try to use clever language, so translating it sometimes gets a little difficult. So there's a chapter in the book, chapter 6, and it's about the difference between motivation based on extrinsic consequences, rewards, punishments, and motivation based on the internal embracing of a value, where it becomes your personal compass, your personal value. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So I won't do more with that now. But we need to teach the children's hearts. And that's a totally different pedagogy. The pedagogy of the head is traditional educational pedagogy. Teaching children knowledge, transferring knowledge, we know those pedagogies. Teaching children how to be critical thinkers, we know those pedagogies. But when it comes to teaching the children's hearts, that's different. That's based on social networks and relationships, about role modeling. It's about creating schools which themselves embody goodness in their cultures and their norms. About adults in schools embodying goodness, being good people. And it's about children emotionally bonding to those adults in those institutions. And it doesn't matter what the adults think about whether a culture, a school, or a classroom is a good one. It matters what children think about it. And if they don't feel connected to it, it doesn't work. So we have to actually check and see, are the children in this school, in this classroom, feeling safe, feeling connected, feeling bonded? And that's not so easy to do. And that's quite different than transferring knowledge. We're teaching critical thinking. But even that's not enough. You can have the head, the knowledge, the cognitive piece, you can have the heart, the motivational piece, and still fail at being a good person because you don't have the hand, the skills. Children don't come into schools necessarily knowing how to disagree respectfully. They don't come into schools necessarily knowing how to manage their anger. They don't come into schools necessarily knowing how to repair a relationship with a friend that's been tarnished for some reason. They don't know these things necessarily. And I can't speak about Spain because I don't know enough about here, but in the US, children are coming to school more under-socialized than they used to, with less of the social skills, the competencies than they used to have. And so it behooves us as schools to focus on that, to make sure children are equipped with the social and emotional competencies they need to navigate the world effectively. So if they see a peer being bullied by an older child, they will know how to intervene without just becoming a victim themselves. If they have an anger problem and they feel their anger coming up, and they will have the skills to know how to recognize what's happening and stop it before it becomes a problem. And we have to actually teach those in our classrooms, in our schools. If we want children to be good people, we can't just teach to the head. We have to teach to the heart and the mind as well. So that's this definition. You'll hate this definition, but I wrote it, so too bad. It's my definition, so this is my psychobabble definition. But all it really says in the first two lines is that character is a lot of parts of your psychological makeup. The complex constellation of psychological characteristics means there's a lot of psychological stuff about you that motivates and enables, makes you want to and able to. So all that psychological stuff about you, your conscience and your perspective taking, empathy and so on, that make you want to and able to do the right thing. So what are the parts of your psychological makeup that make you want to and able to do the right thing? And there's a lot of it, so it's complicated. So that's sort of the goal. Now, one of the interesting pieces that I get in schools all the time is that they try to do character education without first defining their outcomes. So we're going to do character education in our school, and we're going to do these practices. And then I ask them, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, we want kids to have good character. Well, what does character mean? And maybe they'll give me a list of 5 things: respect, responsibility, caring, honesty. What are those things? They're stuck. They don't know. Or they can give me some very thin definition of it. So how do you know it when you see it? I don't know. So really, in education, if there's something we've learned over the last 20, 30 years, it's accountability and the importance of accountability. But we don't do that in character education. We don't do accountability well. We do it in math. We do it in language arts. We don't do it in character education. So we need rich, deep descriptions of that which we're trying to accomplish. And we need to justify that. And then we actually need to align those with our methods. And that almost never happens. One of the stories I tell, and I believe it's in the book, I can't even remember everything that's in there now, was a secondary school principal who came to me after a lot of training in character education. I run a year-long academy for school leaders, head teachers, principals. And he came to me and said, Marvin, I've got this new character education program in our school. I want to tell you about it. And I said, great. He said, first let me tell you why. I said, wonderful. He said, we caught some students cheating on an exam. And we were stunned. And then we started doing research and realized that this is fairly common. In secondary schools, at universities, cheating goes on. And so we decided to do a program to stop cheating and academic dishonesty. And I said, great. I said, so what are you doing? He said, service learning. We're going to do service learning. And we're going to do it right. And he described how they're going to do it. And they were doing it right. Lots of professional development, integrated across the entire school, throughout all the curricula, and so on. It was really mandatory for all students. It was really well done. And then I looked at him and I said, that's wonderful. Service learning is one of the methods that Angel was talking about from that study, What Works, that we found as an effective method. It's a wonderful method. You're implementing it really intelligently. I have a question though. And he said, what's your question? And I said, what does service learning have to do with academic dishonesty? And they had never even thought of it. They had a goal. We want to stop cheating. They found a good thing. They're going to do that with no thought about whether there's a connection between the two. So I'm going to tell you a joke. I hope it works. This is a classic joke that I just love. And it's one of these jokes that's a lesson on life. So the joke goes the following. A man is walking home one night in the evening, it's dark, and he sees another man down on his hands and knees on the corner looking through the grass. You know this one. Okay? It's a classic joke. It's a metaphor for life. And he says to him, what are you doing? He said, I'm looking for my car keys. I lost my car keys. And he said, well, let me help you. And he gets down, and they're under the street light there, and they're looking in the grass, and it's pretty clear, and nothing. They cannot find it. And finally, after 10 minutes, the second man says, are you sure you lost your keys here? And the guy said, oh, no, I lost them down there. Service learning, but it has nothing to do with academic dishonesty. That problem of alignment is a critical problem in pedagogy in general, but particularly in character education. So what is good character education? It's a little different for me. For me, it's a way of being. So I just got an email from a principal who I've been mentoring, a head teacher, who said, Marvin, I just got a bunch of money to use on character education. So I want to set up a room in my school, which will be the character room. And we'll have these lessons, and all the students will be required to go in there once a week, or I forgot how often she said, and get these 50-minute character lessons. And my response to her was, no. I said, you invest every penny of that in the professional development of your teachers. Don't waste it on lessons. There's an obsession in character education with teaching children lessons about right and wrong, okay? And Father, forgive me for my sins, but it goes back to the old catechisms in a sense of lessons. We have to teach them the lessons of right and wrong. And a great thought experiment, which we don't have time to do fully now, but I'll describe for you, is to think about your own character and some strength that you have. And we all have a strength, at least one strength. And think about some character strength. You're particularly caring or honest or reliable or loyal or whatever you are. And then think about where that came from. How did you end up being that kind of person? And I've done this so many times. I know that nobody in here will say it was a lesson I was taught at school. We don't become who we are because of these, didactic lessons in school. We become who we are because of the communities we belong to, the role models in our lives, the way other people treat us, the way they act in our presence. We know in psychology what impacts our character, and yet we look under the street lamp all the time in the wrong place. And that's why I wrote the book. The book it's called You Can't Teach to a Rat, but the subtitle is more important. It's And Other Epiphanies for Educators. I actually have a shirt that says Dr. Marvin Berkowitz, Epiphany Engineer, that my students made for me. Because I realize what I have to do with educators is to make those light bulbs flash over their heads. To engineer their epiphanies, where they suddenly look at what they do and go, oh my, why have we been doing this all these years? This is not what's good for children. Because really, I'm an outsider to education. I'm a psychologist. I walk into schools. I don't know how many of you know the fable of the emperor's new clothes. But if you know that one, I'm the little boy in that story who walks around, the only one who says, the emperor's naked. Why is he naked? He's got no clothes on. Everybody else pretends the emperor's got clothes on. And that's what I do in schools, and that's why I wrote the book. The book was to engineer a series of epiphanies. They're thought experiments to do that. And one of them is that character education is not about lessons, and it's not about rewards, and it's not about these big meetings at the school where we call 6 children up in front of the entire school and say, these were the really good children this month. Okay? How many of you have children? Just raise your hand if you have children. Okay, a few of you. So, I'm assuming you want your children to have good character and not to be evil, right? I'll make that a fair assumption in most cases. So I assume as parents, you do the things you think would help your child become a good person rather than a bad person. And I promise you, you do almost none of the things that teachers do in schools. How many of you have posters all around your house with character words on them that say respect or responsibility, and you have them all around your house? Schools have them all over the place, right? How many of you walk around with little slips of paper in your pocket, and when your child does something good, you give them one at the end of the week? If they got 5, they get an extra dessert for dinner. You do that one? Schools do it all the time. Okay. Or here's a great one. How many of you bring your family together once a month to announce which member of your family had the best character that month? Do you do that with your family? No, but we do it in schools all the time. We're looking under the street lamps when that's not where character is. Character is a way of being. It's what it is. It's how we be with children. My friend Charles Elbot, who's a wonderful educator and character educator, who's also a Buddhist, looked at this and he said, Marvin, that's Buddhism. Okay, if you say so. I have no idea. But and for most educators, it's a new way of being. To be a good character educator, you have to change the way you are with children. Change our cultures and our manner of being. It's not about lessons and it's not about rewards. And it is complicated, that's all. It's an expression in English. It's something that's rocket science, means it's very complicated. And it is very complicated. This is a wonderful quote from Paul Houston. Schools are perfectly designed for the results we are getting. If we don't like the results, we need to redesign schools. And you could substitute the word classroom for school there if you want to think about it on the level of a classroom. A classroom is perfectly designed if the results you're getting. I'm not sure when your school year starts and ends, but in the US we're getting near the end of our school year. And so I ask teachers to reflect back on this year and to ask them the question. Ask themselves, are my students performing academically as well as I had hoped? And are they demonstrating character as well as I had hoped? And the answer will always be no. It's always no, because we expect more than we get. Then the question becomes, well, what will you do to increase the likelihood of your results being what you wanted? And this quote says, if you do the same things over and over and expect different results, you are insane. That's a definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over, expecting different results. So we need to re-engineer our schools and classrooms so they're more likely to produce the results we want. And this is scary and daunting because it means looking in a mirror and changing who you are, changing the way you be. And that's not something most educators and most people are willing to do casually. It's a frightening proposition to have to say, I need to be a different educator than I am so that I can get what I want. But that's what this is about. It's about being different. So this is the model I'm going to go through very quickly. The book wasn't organized to use this language, but there are chapters on that. Chapter 6 is on the bottom one. I can't remember the numbers escape me all the time. But the fourth one is chapter 4. Chapter 6 is the middle one. The fifth one is chapter 10, and so on. So they're in there, but just not with those words. So these are 5 big ideas about how to do character education right. And I don't have a lot of time to deal with them, so I'll do them somewhat quickly. The first one, the P in this stands for prioritization, or making character an authentic priority. And this is often where the whole project fails at the beginning. Because in the world of academic accountability, high stakes testing, which is all over the world now, we have come to believe that school has a singular purpose, and that's scoring high on these high-stakes tests. And that is a complete annihilation of quality education. It's killing education. It's killing it in lots of ways. It's bad academic pedagogy by itself, but it also is misconstruing the true purpose of education. And the true purpose of education is shaping the future adults and citizens of our world. It's helping children become the kind of people to whom we want to bequeath that which we have shepherded as adults. We have a world, a society, and we hand it off to the next generation. And we need to prepare them to carry that world on and to take it to higher levels, to tikkun, make it better, improve it. And that's what education is about. And in democratic societies like ours, yours and mine, we have to prepare children to not just enter into, but to own the world that they are going to help run as democratic citizens. And becoming a democratic citizen doesn't happen simply by teaching about democracy and government and civics and citizenship. It comes about by being part of the common sphere and discovering the power of your voice in the common sphere, searching for the common good. And I'll tell you, at least in the US, the common good is an endangered species and it's dying. We're losing the idea of the common good. We have become so selfish and so individualistic that democracy has evolved into a mathematical enterprise where everybody advocates for their personal interests and the one with the largest number wins. That's never what the blueprints of democracy and the philosophy of democracy was about. And we have to help shape students and children who will understand how to be co-owners of the world that we are handing off to them. So it has to be an authentic priority. It has to be a purpose of schooling. And there are some quotes in here, and these are powerful quotes. I don't have the time to do them with you now, but I'm giving them to you. This one, the one from Teddy Roosevelt, this one, these are, you can read them on your own. They're great quotes that really make the point. Whoops. And I just want to mention briefly that one of the biggest pieces in prioritization is to get the entire staff to understand this. And probably the single most common lament I get from school leaders is that they don't know how to get their staff to join them in this vision of what a school ought to be like. And they struggle. And I don't know about school leader preparation in Spain, but it's not very good in the US because we teach them the wrong things. We don't teach them how to be managers of people. We don't teach them how to be shepherds of an adult culture and a school culture. We don't teach them those social emotional competencies they need to do those kinds of things. Instead, we teach them about, law and finance and all this nonsense that not as important. So that's all I have time to do with that one. The second of the 5 things, the P was prioritization, the R is relationships. Relationships are the molecules from which we build both good schools and good character. And we have to be strategic and intentional in focusing on relationships. Relationships comes up in chapter after chapter after chapter in this book. We often assume that because as educators we have good hearts and care about children, that healthy relationships will develop. And they will, sometimes, but often not. And there are certain groups that get left out. They may be a particular ethnic or racial group, a gender or religious group. They may be children who struggle with certain competencies that academics require. They may be socioeconomic groups. They may be just a child who's different, who's odd, who's got some challenges. And oftentimes those relationships don't happen. In US schools, one group that gets forgotten always are the non-professional staff. The people who clean the school, who cook the food, the secretaries in the office, and so on. They often get marginalized. They are important parts of the culture. And we've created strategic ways they can be included in the school. And it changes the whole school culture. For a school to be a community, all community members have to be valued and integrated and relationships developed. I don't have time to get into the pedagogical methods of how you do this, but there are strategic, intentional methods to do this. Child to child, teacher to child, teacher to teacher, child to a non-professional adult, and so on down the line. And we have to be strategic and intentional in building these relationships. Again, more quotes. There's a chapter in the book that I wish I had time to do now, but I don't, called the Tarnished, Golden, and Invulnerable Children. Or maybe it's in a different order, but it's those three. The golden children are the kids who come into school with great families, great communities. They're wonderful. They're doing great. And those are the ones teachers gravitate towards. They love those kids. The problem with them is they don't need you. They're going to be good. They're going to do just fine, even if you're a lousy teacher. They've got so much going for them, all these assets. The tarnished children are the ones who come from dysfunctional families, antisocial communities, under-resourced communities, and they struggle in school and they make it hard to teach and disrupt your classrooms. And those are the ones teachers tend to push away and don't want in their classrooms. But for those kids, we have the potential to not only help them get on a good track, but in some cases, literally to save their lives, to save them from premature death due to drugs or criminality or violence or risk-taking and so on. And yet we push those kids away. And then there's research on what are called the invulnerable children, which are children that come from those really challenging backgrounds, but somehow miraculously seem to turn out well. And they've been studied. And the one thing they find about these kids over and over is there's always some adult outside this kid's dysfunctional world who takes an enduring, benevolent interest in the child, who says, I see what this kid's life is like. This child didn't choose to have a mentally ill mother or an abusive father or absentee parents, or a predator for an uncle or an older brother or whatever. It's just, no child would choose that. I can't blame the child for that. And I feel bad, so I'm going to try to add some sanity to the child's life. That saves children, sometimes saves their lives. And we can translate to the schools where teachers have to do that with kids as well. They have to be those people. So this is the thing, but I don't have time to do that. And I do want to at least mention that one of the most neglected pieces of character education is the adult culture in the school. One of my simple models of character education, first let me spend a year with the school leader so they deeply understand this. Then I ask the school leader to spend a year just working with the adults in the school, creating the kind of culture we need. Then we can worry about doing things for children. But until we get the school leader right and the adult culture right, there's a real limit on how much we can do for children. So the third one of the more controversial ones, chapter 6 in the book. And I mentioned it already, this notion of intrinsics and extrinsics. Educators, at least in the US, are obsessed with giving children rewards for their behavior. And it's the adults who are addicted to this. The kids don't care. You take this stuff out of a school, the kids don't even notice. It's the parents and the teachers who feel like they've lost their moorings when you take away rewards in schools. They are not only unnecessary, they're not good. And so is the public affirmation of children. To have those big school-wide meetings where we say, these 5 children were the children of respect for this month. I don't know what educators think, but they must be sitting there thinking, the children who are in the audience watching this are thinking, Susanna is a student of respect this month. I am so deeply inspired. I am going to rededicate myself to being a more respectful child. I mean, I wonder sometimes if educators have actually met a child. Where do they get these ideas that children think like that? They're bored. And some of them are thinking, I hate this school. Susanna is always disrespectful to me, and she gets up there, I hate the school. And the next day, parents are all calling the school to complain that how come Susanna got the award and my child didn't? So now the parents hate the school too. It's a brilliant pedagogy. Makes everybody hate your school or be bored. And they think somehow this builds character. It does not. It does not. What we need to do instead is model, and I'll talk about this in just a second, model good character. We have to embody it as an institution and as an individual adults in the school. Okay? And we should affirm children in private. All you have to do is go up. If Susanna was being respectful, just go up to her alone and put your hand on her shoulder and say, Susanna, I saw what you did. That was so respectful. I'm so proud of you. That's what makes this a great school. Keep it up and thank you. And walk away. No audience. Don't need an audience. That's enough. We have things like we call positive office referrals. In U.S. schools, oftentimes if children are misbehaving enough, they get sent to the office so that the administrator yells at them. Okay? Instead, we send them to be affirmed. When they do something good, they go down there privately. And the school, the head of the school says to them, I heard what you did. I'm so proud of you. Give me a hug or give me a high five or whatever. Go on back to your classroom. I'm really proud of you. And that's it. Doesn't give them a piece of candy. Doesn't give them a pencil that smells like a strawberry. Doesn't do any of that nonsense. Doesn't stick a sticker on their clothing that says, I'm a great child, and by implication, you're not. Doesn't do any of that stuff. Just affirms them. Or sometimes phone calls home to tell parents, you know what Susanna did today? I'm so proud of her. We have parents breaking down in tears on the phone saying nobody from a school has ever called this house to say a positive thing about any child. Because schools don't take the time to do that. Or positive notes sent home, individual private affirmation. Okay, last two, whoops. I'm going to skip these. These are easy. Modeling. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. I say, be the character you want to see in children. You cannot be a hypocrite and expect children to become good. The adults in the school have to embody the character they want to see in children. I don't care how much you get paid. I don't care how much your status is as a teacher in your society. This is a calling. It's no less a calling than the calling of military service or religious life. It's a calling to service. In this case, it's a calling to serve children. And when you're called to serve, you do it because it's part of why you're there. And we have to do that. And we have to get that message across. And then the last one, I close with this one, empowerment. I alluded to it before. It's about the notion of democracy. But every human being has a fundamental need to feel a sense of worth and control and power. Every human being. 4-year-old children, 80-year-old men and women, everybody needs to feel that I matter and I have some influence in the world. Teachers are dictators. They are benevolent dictators, but they are dictators. Educational systems are hierarchical and authoritarian. They're benevolent, but they're still authoritarian. Children are disempowered. Teachers are to a large degree also by the educational system. But children are particularly disempowered. Schools need to shift their pedagogies to be empowering pedagogies. So children, as appropriate, but there are actually radical democratic schools where children run the school. I'm not advocating that. And I've worked in some of those. I've seen that. So the kinds of things that I'm advocating to me are fairly minor. But to educators, they are daunting. They are frightening. To give children a voice. Most children in schools never have any say in what they're taught, how they're taught, how they're assessed, how they're disciplined. They have no voice in that. And there are many, many opportunities in schools every single day for children's voices to matter. And there's actually a chapter in the book on power. Actually, there's another one called Brain Drain, in which I argue that we're wasting the brains of people in the school. Very often, children will outthink the teacher. Teachers in schools think that they have to solve every problem, make every decision, and they don't. And very often kids will do a better job than the teacher will if you let them. But we don't give them the opportunity. So they never have a sense of power. And because of that, they never have a sense of co-ownership and co-authorship. And we all need that. We embrace things when we feel like we have a stake in them. And if it's just done to us. And you and I are no different than these children. When people just tell us what to do and order us around, we resent it. And we are less likely to commit to that than if somebody says, boy, this is a tough issue. You got any ideas? Can you help? So I'm going to stop there because I've gone over time. We started a little late and I ran a little long. So I'm going to stop and answer questions. And Juan Pablo, are you going to translate?